Hello, it's Tom from Quantumplate here, and we've been asked to demonstrate how we would deal with a bordereaux with some irregular formatting. Specifically, there are some subtotals, kind of breaking up the main block of data, and they're pretty straightforward to deal with. I can show you how we do that in a minute. We've also got a few other issues which are interesting. So here the headers have been split over two cells. So invoice and date are split over two cells. Cyber limit A to E, cyber limit F, cyber premium. They've all been split over two cells, so we'll need to merge these two rows together to create a single header. And then we have some metadata at the top, which we also wish to capture. And one of the interesting things about the metadata is that's in its own set of columns. So we've got reporting period, January the 1st, implied that it runs to January the 31st, so an unlabeled column there. We've also got contract, a code, and a description. So I'll show you now how we deal with that. First, we'll look at capturing the main block of data, and then I'll show you how we capture this block of metadata up here. So let's jump into the product. So here we are in Quantumplate, and we're looking at the feeds window. So just as a quick refresh, the data is going to come in via the feeds, and I've set up an additional MGA4 bordereaux feed to import that data. That's where all the data requesting and so forth is managed. It's then automatically passed on to a pipeline to do that initial cleanse. So the initial cleanse is going to be slightly different for each MGA you have. And so I've set up an additional pipeline just to do that initial cleanse and map to our target schema. It's then going to be passed on to our central pipeline to do all those central validation processes. So let's dive into this MGA4 pipeline. And we'll start by having a look at how we import that main block of data, I think, because that's the simpler use case. I'll then talk about how we deal with that header information. So the first thing is we strip out all that header information that was above the table. So we say just get rid of any rows that have less than 6 columns of data. And that's not only going to remove that header information, which we'll capture separately, but it's going to remove those subtotals too. We then use our detect headers operation to grab those headers. Now, if you remember, we've got things like invoice date split over there, cyber limit A to E split over 2, but that's very simple to deal with. In detect headers, we just say use the first 2 rows as the header rather than the first one, and it will merge them together. We then just need to clip off some data that we don't need. So let's go back and look here. So there are actually a ton of hidden columns in that data that the supplier had just sort of hidden them in the Excel sheet, but of course they're still there in the file, and so they come through, and so we're just going to say clip off everything to the right of the team column. Let's go back to that. So that just uses the clip from column operation. So we say get rid of everything right of the team column, and then we've essentially got to the main block of data, and we just need to map it in using map column headers. So these are our column names that have come in from that data set. So policy number to policy number, effective date to effective date, and so on. We've mapped that in. Okay, so let's hop over to the outputs view to see how that looks once we've run it. And we're going to go to the stage 2 output there. And yeah, we can see all that data has been mapped in. And we're not seeing those subtotals appear. And we've dealt with those kind of 2-line headers, and we've just mapped them in correctly to the right target header. So all fairly straightforward. Now let's take a look at the process for grabbing that metadata. So we're going to grab all this data here at the top. We're going to transpose it and get rid of these blank columns here. I'm going to step through each part of the process just to show you how it's all set up, show that it's quite easy to set up, and show you that there's a pattern to this which can be easily replicated across other MGAs. It's just a question of adjusting a few parameters. So the first thing we're going to do is clip all the data to the right of the metadata. So we're going to clip after column 6 there, because we don't need any of those blank columns. Then we're going to remove the main data because we've already processed that separately. And we do that by saying if the rows are, if that column 6 is not empty, then remove it. Or if the rows have less than 2 columns of data, then get rid of that as well. And that will get us down to a much more compact data grid to work with. Finally, we're just going to give some meaningful column names so that it's just easier to follow this process and easier for people to understand if they come and look at this later. So we've got our data down to 3 columns, and we're going to call the first column the header, because if we look at the data, so this is going to become the header, and then we're going to call this column 1 and this column 2. So if we run that, then we can see what the output looks like. So we've got the header, column 1 and column 2. So now all we need to do is transpose that data. So we're going to use the swing down operation, and this is all explained on our help center. I'll just go over there now. You can have a look at this. It's all publicly available, and it transposes data in this way. I'll just give you a second to look at that. So you've got the input data up here and the output data here, and that's going to help us transpose that data. Okay, so far so good. It's done what we expected it to. And it's separated out these reporting periods into reporting period 1 and reporting period 2. Likewise with the contract, it's separated them out into contract 1 and contract 2. So then we'll merge the header ID column with the header column to make that distinct, and then we'll be able to map reporting period 1 to a name like reporting period start date, and reporting period 2 to reporting period end date. Let's go and have a look at how we do that. We're also going to remove those kind of empty rows that we saw in there. So just put another remove rows in. And this is where we do that combination. So we're combining the header column with the header ID column, with the space as a separator there, giving a little preview of how that's going to look. And so that's enabling us to differentiate the start date from the end date of the reporting period. So there we go. We've now got reporting period 1, reporting period 2, contract 1, contract 2, and then the items which just had a single value are just coming through as one row. So now we just need to go through the process of transposing them. And to do that, we put in a couple of calculate operations where we split out the fields into separate columns and then put an ID column in to show if a value is populated. This is easier to understand if I just show you what the data looks like. So we'll do that now. Okay, and here we are. So we've created this matrix of splitting the value in this value column out into its own column called reporting period start, reporting period end, company, contract code. And the reason we've done that is because the next thing we're going to do is aggregate it all up. So roll it all up and use this ID column, which is indicating which column is populated. Use that to tell the aggregate operation which value to grab. So, and that is just a simple couple of calculate operations, and where we're just defining what we want our output columns to be called, and some if statements to move them into a separate column, and then some if statements to create those flag columns. And this is all very simple kind of copy and paste stuff. If if I press Control C there, my operations are copied to the clipboard, and I can go and replicate that in another pipeline. I might be receiving slightly different column names in another pipeline, so I might need to adjust that. But otherwise the logic is totally copy and paste. So that final step is we just do an aggregate where we roll up those columns. Very easy to configure. We just add the values in, and we're going to use our reference aggregation. So this picks a value from the reporting period column, or reporting period start column rather, based on the maximum value in that flag column that we identified earlier. So it's going to take the value that's populated rather than the value that isn't. And that should just create one row of data. So let's have a look at that. And here we are, one row of data all grabbed from that metadata block. Now I'll show you how we integrate that with the rest of the data just quickly. So we'll just go back to our sort of full pipeline rather than the simplified version, and we've imported our header information, we've imported the main data. We now combine those inputs together, so stick them on top of each other using a union, and that gives us our row of data there, and our so we've got our metadata there and our main data here. We just then we're going to use the fill down operation to just copy these values down through the rest of the table, and then we'll just delete this row here, and that's super easy. It's just fill down those columns, and we just have a remove rows to get rid of that top row that we were using for the fill down. And the output of that is that you then have that complete data set capturing not just the main data, but the metadata that was on top of it, normalizing the header structure, mapping it to your target schema, all in a way that is very easy to set up and very easy to maintain if there are changes to that incoming data structure in future.